Okay, wait, I'm getting a dispatch. We are being watched. The government has a secret system, a machine that spies on you every hour of every day. We at Dove Weather have created a competing machine to protect you, the listener. Right now, the machine is analyzing the thousands of scenarios that could transpire after you listen to this episode. For those of you who are single, there is a 95% chance you will kiss a lover in an elevator right before they sacrifice themselves to save your life. Don't worry, your lover will survive and you will be reunited. But I have bad news for AP. I am sitting across the room from AP and he has a 99.99% chance of experiencing cat allergies during this recording.
No.
AP, your number is up and Agent Nomi is on the way right now.
Oh no.
Yes, the Dove Weather machine has brought up AP as the number.
Some say it's a lucky number. I think it's an unlucky number because the agent is definitely sinking her claws, allergy claws onto me right now.
Yeah, I didn't know that Nomi was one of the agents of the machine, but I guess just like in the show that we're talking about today, Person of Interest, some of the characters, they get more of a developed storyline as the show goes on.
That's what I call my online dating app matches, Person of Interest.
Yeah, and that's where we leave AP to sit with that one for a bit. But yeah, I'm excited to discuss a show that aired in the 2010s with you on CBS from 2011 to 2016, Person of Interest.
Yeah, you're the one with the history here.
Definitely.
You were watching it as it came out, right?
Yeah, so I wasn't watching it like as it aired in the first few seasons, but it started getting some buzz around like season 2, season 3, and then I started catching up, and by the time we got to season 4, I was definitely watching the episodes as they aired, and yeah, I became a pretty big fan of the show.
Yeah. I such a fan that some might say it landed high in a list that you might have made. But I guess I've never heard of this. I mean, I've heard of the show, but I never wanted to watch it. And I have watched it now, and I have thoughts.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do want to call out here first is it's created by Jonathan Nolan.
That's correct. Yeah, who's the brother of Chris Nolan. And so, I primarily know Jonathan Nolan from 3 shows. Person of Interest, and then after that, he went on to do Westworld on HBO, which infamously had a critically acclaimed first season, but then each season after that, like, people liked it less and less because it kind of went up its own asshole and then, like, tried to reinvent itself and then basically has lost the plot completely and then got canceled before it could have a proper ending.
Yeah. And much like, and I think part of his oeuvre is this, is very noticeable here in Person of Interest, which is the idea of technology and its intersection with the state and with people, and even maybe with the promotion of love.
Yeah. So when the show started, the main characters were played by Jim Caviezel, who played Reese, and Michael Emerson, who played Finch. And, so it really attracted like the typical CBS procedural audience. But then as it went on, it introduced Root, who is played by Amy Acker, who many people know from Angel, and Sarah Shahi as Shaw, who some of you may know from The L Word, among other things. And these 2 characters started a lesbian romance that really became the heart of the series.
And that's kind of what we're coming into, because on first impression, I thought this show was like an NCIS, like Criminal Minds, Chicago PD, and you told me that, like, yeah, that's kind of how it started. But what we're gonna talk about today really ended up reminded me reminding me more of things like Orphan Black or The Blacklist or Mr. Robot.
Yeah, because the show became more serialized and it started delving more into like the sci-fi aspects and this war between two different artificial intelligences, it started attracting an audience that was definitely more of like the Orphan Black crowd. And of course, the other tie between it and Orphan Black is like lesbian romance that, it was definitely a slow burn on the show, but like Shaw and Root shippers were all over Twitter during that era. And not just like in America. I knew a lot of people who were into Person of Interest like from all over the world. And it was fun to see people, sometimes people would be like making their own like subtitles and like doing like fan translations and doing like all these fun things, and then you would get people like in your Twitter replies speaking a different language about Person of Interest, and you're like, damn, this is pretty cool.
They're like, me encantan las lesbianas.
Yeah, exactly. It does remind me that I did go to the Austin TV Festival ATX one year, and they had a panel on Person of Interest that Jonathan Nolan was at, and my friend Jake from Norway and I, friend of the show, we were basically like live tweeting everything that Jonathan Nolan said, and then we kind of went semi-viral in the Person of Interest world because like we were basically broadcasting like that, like, oh yeah, they know that like the lesbians are like the most important part of the show.
You were being the Samaritan agents. You were like, Jonathan Nolan's walking down Fifth Street. He's taking a left on.
Unfortunately, there have been some people at ATX in some of the earlier years, particularly when Gilmore Girls was at the festival. They did get pretty creepy. Luckily, Jake and I, we were never that type. We were always like scared to like ask for a picture with anyone.
That is kind of the thing that you brought to me. Mm-hmm. You told me that this show has a real. Really connected with gay LGBTQ plus audiences for this romance.
Yeah,
and we are seeing it. We have 2 episodes to talk about. What's the first one?
Yeah, so the first one is If Then Else. This is considered by many to be the best episode in the show, and it is written by Denise T., who also co-wrote our other episode and went on to be one of the executive producers for Westworld. And Denise T., like by many fans, was considered to be like one of the best, if not the best writers on the show. So much so that she co-wrote with Nolan the series finale, and it is directed by Chris Fisher. So earlier, AP made a reference to the fact that I put something Person of Interest related on the top of a list. And yeah, it was this episode, If Then Else. I put it as number 1 on a 100 episode list of the best episodes of 2015. This was basically like, in early 2016, this was like the one year where I was like, okay, I have time to like catch up on all the most acclaimed shows that have aired in the last year, and I'm going to make like a definitive list of the best 100 episodes.
Yeah, you weren't just prowling the AV Club comment section. You were out there making lists, ranking episodes.
Yeah, and this list is like, it got kind of a lot of attention, so much so that like some of like the biggest American TV critics talked about it on like one of their podcasts, because I kind of like subtweeted critics, because I was like, that was like back in the era where there was like a few shows where I liked parts of them, but I also thought they were very overrated. Like Leftovers and Fargo being 2 of them.
That's wild. I have not known this. That is okay. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna put a pin on that.
Yeah. There's more to talk about there, but okay, I'm just going to read what I wrote in early 2016, just because I think it'll be fun to revisit this thing that I wrote like 8 years ago. All right, here we go. The best episode of the year is an exciting heist story, a treatise on the limits of artificial intelligence. a deconstruction of television, a love story and a tragedy rolled into one. At its core, If Then Else is about the machine, an artificial intelligence that is programmed to save lives, running through thousands of scenarios, trying to find the best one to save our heroes and stop an evil artificial intelligence from causing a global market collapse. Finch, Root, Reese, and Fusco are trapped in a room in the New York Stock Exchange. The audience sees 4 different scenarios play out where characters are paired off in different ways. Exploring how different character pairings affect the outcome is fun, but the real kick comes out of the bold finales, which often end with multiple major characters dead. Each scenario is infused with electricity by the use of glitch mobs' infectious fortune days. At a certain point, the machine simplifies the scenario by having the characters speak what their dialogue is doing instead of the actual words. This emphasizes each character's purposes in the team while poking fun at their dialogical patterns. Reese, cruelly delivered sadistic warning. Fusco, self-deprecating inquiry into the time necessary to infiltrate system.
And it goes on,
It
right?
goes on.
And frankly, I want to start here. I hated that scene.
I loved it. I loved it.
despise that scene. I understand that the machine was being low fidelity in her simulation, but like,
It was really fun in the moment because it was like, okay, I mean, I think we've already established on this podcast, I like meta humor, you don't like meta humor. So it makes sense that I would like this scene and that you would not like this scene. But it's basically the characters, I think the best part for me was like the Root and Shaw part, because this is before the 2 characters had ever kissed. And so kind of taking a lot of their tensions, a lot of the subtext, and making it more text, like that felt novel at the time. And like turning the characters into kind of a parody of the characters just for 90 seconds. It was like a really fun part of it for me.
yeah, no, I could see how people like it being fun. One of the things that I just maybe I'm not enamored by this way of writing is because some of the advice that I've gotten, both in college and outside of college, about how to write better, is that writing isn't linear. So if you just have an idea that you want to expand upon later, you could just write down something like that. Like you could just say witty banter, and then you come back to write that. And so of course there's reasoning behind it. It's just not my thing. Not my thing.
And I think that the machine is fast forwarding because it doesn't have much time left. Like when the episode starts, or at least when the scene starts where it's going through all these scenarios, there's about 10 seconds left. And every time it goes through a scenario, it kind of takes a few seconds to play out this scenario in the machine's time. So it's fast forwarding through this because it's okay, I know what's going to happen. I don't need to go through their exact words. Let's get to the part where we find out whether they all die.
It's just it just brings up a lot of questions. Truly, at least in my mind, as someone who didn't have the emotional connection to watching this weekly or binging it at some point. Because when I am seeing the machine choosing a low fidelity dialogue, to me, as someone new, and someone who wrote down a whole bunch of cheesy lines that came before the simulation, I'm these are both weighted the same to me. So I have a couple here. You want to hear a couple?
Yeah, let's do it.
So Lionel Fusco. First of all, great. Love this character. He says at some point, gotta love where a badge can get you. Or he also says, this day just keeps getting worse.
Yeah.
When the scene, the looping of scenarios starts, it's he says, at least we won't die hungry. while the most muffins ever piled up in a plate was in the foreground. Like, he says, remember the Alamo. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a character where I feel like on its face, it's a really dumb character, but he's definitely someone where you grow affection for him over time. Of course, like this was before I like got radicalized, and like now I'm all like ACAB. So like going into any TV show now that like has cops, I'm going to be on the defensive and be like, I don't want to like these guys. But like, I think that the performance that he gives, like he leans into the cheesiness. He knows it's cheesy.
Absolutely.
Like if you compare that to Jim Caviezel, I think he's pretty much universally believed, at least by the online fandom, to be like the weakest part of the cast.
Oh, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Like Jim Caviezel, his character, John Reese, some sort of former, I don't know, national, like, cop guy. I don't know. He's also got, like, hella cheesy lines. But more than that, he has one face.
He does.
He has just one face.
One face and one voice.
Absolutely. He uses it for everything. And later on in the season, there's like some like romantic interest that like pops up, and I watched a couple of episodes here and there, the later season, and he was still just like flirting with this like frozen face, the same face he has when he kills people, the same face when he gets shot, the same face when he is elated. Like, no, this guy. No, get this guy one more face, please.
Yeah, and see now you're actually really falling into what the fandom thought at the time, because basically, like the fandom discourse was always like, we hate Reese, we don't need Reese, but like Reese was what got the show greenlit. Essentially, is that like they had to like bring in the guy from Passion of the Christ, to get like all the 60-year-olds to watch who live in the suburbs. But then like as the show on, it focused less on Reese, and he kind of just became a part of the recipe instead of the center of it.
Yeah, he just became the muscle. I don't know what he was before this season. It was season 4. But he's just the muscle after that.
Yeah.
Like I just want to mention Harold Finch here too.
Yeah. So Michael Emerson, he's the king. We all love his performance on Lost. He stole the show, even though he didn't become a main character until like season 3 or 4. So like that just shows how good he is.
Yeah, this I never saw Lost, so like when I saw this guy, I was like, I know that face. I've seen that face. And that's all. That's the entirety of the knowledge I had on him. But like Harold Finch as a character, like when this was being aired, and when this was in the type of character he is, he's just the autistic guy, the genius autistic guy, so in the same style as Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, or Abed from Community, or Dr. Reed from Criminal Minds, or Rick and Morty. Like, it's just that same type of dude.
See, as someone who is neurodivergent, I see very distinct differences between the characters you named. I mean, like, Sheldon and Abed, like, Sheldon is like a character I hate. Abed is a character I love. And I think that both of those two characters, like, they kind of leaned into the humor of, like, this is a really weird guy. Well, with Finch, like, he's definitely a weirdo, but, like, he has, like, more compassion than I would say those other characters have. Like, he's someone who you can definitely tell that he cares about people a lot. And I think that definitely comes through the more you watch the series.
Yeah, I think we are coming from different angles here, because to me, it's not a commentary on what neurodivergent people can and can't do, or are or aren't like. To me, it's that this character is absolutely coded in the way that a lot of these characters around that time were coded as just as you can tell that they're not Jim Caviezel. They're not just the like cool, calm, collected guy, but they're not the nerdy, goofy, looser nerd from like the 90s. At some point in the 2000s, a lot of these characters that like have this presentation of neurodivergency that might be representative or not. I don't know, but I do know that this guy fits in that type of archetype.
Yeah, so I think with Michael Emerson, like one reason why his character was a fan favorite is because the character is very different from Ben from Lost, but there's definitely like overlaps where Ben is like the biggest weasel ever. He's like a piece of shit who people have made like hundreds of montages of people beating the shit out of Ben on Lost because it was something that people did on that show a lot just because he was always doing shitty things but then like somehow surviving.
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
The thing is, like in Fallout, which I've seen a couple of episodes, which Jonathan Nolan has has his fingers in that pie too. He shows up, and he also plays this kind of like weaselly scientist type, but like without any of the coded neurodivergency.
Yeah, I'm glad we brought in Fallout because that's part of the reason why we're having this episode now is that, Jonathan Nolan, he's one of the executive producers of that show. He directed multiple episodes. And I think there is like a line you can draw from Person of Interest to Westworld to Fallout. I think Person of Interest is the best out of those three shows. Obviously, it's early for Fallout, so it could have a renaissance and topple them all. And one thing that I want to bring in here is that I think part of the reason why Person of Interest works better than the other two is because it is constrained to the 45-minute episodes, and because it has like for the first 4 seasons have 22 or more episodes, and so it's really able to tell these episodic stories that over time like really allow you to get to know the characters. Like if you compare it to Fallout, I really don't like that they release all the episodes at once because a lot of people watch like the entire first season in a weekend. And like here I am, I'm like, well, I've watched 4 episodes. I really like the first few. The middle ones, I am starting to get like a little bit bored. And I'm sure that like, if I push through to the end of the season, that maybe I'll be like, oh, it's all worth it. But Person of Interest really makes me kind of yearn back for like the yesteryear of TV.
The 22 episode order season.
Yeah.
That is a past that might never come back. But speaking of the past, I wanted to talk about those characters because really there's 2 characters that we'll continue to talk about.
Yes.
Shaw and Root.
Definitely. Yeah. So Root, she was added at the end of season 1, and immediately like the people who are watching her are like, oh my God, I love this. I want more of her. And at first she was just recurring, but soon she was one of the main characters. And Root has this connection with the machine where, for instance, in this episode, like, the machine like it can like see all the cameras. And so basically like the machine can like feed information to Root so that it's almost like Root is like part of the machine herself.
Yeah, she gets called the analog interface.
Yeah.
And because she just has this what is effectively a magical connection to this super AI thing that can feed her information and direct the team.
Yeah, and I like that because, for instance, you see in one of the scenarios that Finch and Root are running, and they come by this painting on the wall, and Finch makes a remark about it, about, oh, like this is like an original, it looks so beautiful, and then it gets shot, and then like the machine has that information, like, oh, like if they don't move this painting, then it's going to be desecrated. And so the machine is able to feed Root that information, and then Root is able to move the painting to save it. And it's just like little things like that really make me appreciate the show.
And
more.
this character is evolved, from my understanding, evolved a lot. And I was reading some stuff about this character specifically, and I came across an article that talked about the cyborg nature of Root and how that has some major implications. One of them being, where is the boundary of Root and the machine? When is one speaking and when is one not speaking? And there are moments throughout the second part of season 4 where I'm like, I just can't tell who is talking or like why they're talking. And I talked a little bit about the other characters. One of the things that I don't like about the presentation of Root is that she always has this quarter smile about her. She's always a little bit like with a tight smile like this at all times. So it's difficult for me to know exactly when she's being sincere or when she's being aloof or when she's being coquettish even. And especially this double dipping of personalities or conceptions in one mind makes that even more difficult.
Yeah, I think that the muddled divide between Root and the machine is part of like what makes the character so interesting to me, is that you don't know, like you don't know whether it's the machine or Root talking. Like, she can say like, oh, the machine said this, but like, what if the machine wanted it to seem like Root is like the one who's saying something, when in reality it's like the machine. You can get really lost in it, and that's like fun for me. I can understand why you would have difficulty kind of like reading her emotions because of like the way that she presents herself. I also think this is something where like the more you watch the show, the more you're able to kind of decipher some of the nuances in Amy Acker and Sarah Shahi's performances, because I think that they are a bit underrated, and I think that they're, even though both of them either have this remove, or they're like, they say a lot about Shaw, like, oh, she's a sociopath. I think that they actually put more feelings into their performances than you might see at first.
I believe it. It is just it produces a lot of questions for me, especially when it comes to Shaw.
Yeah.
And the relationship there. And Shaw, as a character, for my viewing, feels way more one-dimensional. I get it. She's the badass killer. Like, maybe that's just the episodes I saw. But the badass killer that pushes people off and pushes her emotions off. Like I understand that character. And throughout the scenes where she was talking to like the bomber guy, like all I could think about is just like, you're pointing a gun at a guy that's ready to kill himself. Like that to me was the typification of like this archetypical character of, I'm just here to solve problems with a gun.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have a lot of affection for Shaw. And I think that, I haven't seen a ton of Sarah Shahi's work, but like I saw the L Word after I saw Person of Interest, and when you first see her in the L Word, she's this like really bubbly person, and a lot of the characters on the L Word are acting like assholes at that point, and she feels like a beacon of light. So it was fun. It was fun to like rewatch these episodes with the context I have from the L Word now.
So she's got range.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, pointing the gun at the guy with the bomb, maybe not the best idea, but at the same time, like in a lot of the scenarios, he is about to blow himself up, and then she stops him by shooting him. So, yeah, I mean, I think we can look back at a lot of these characters, and not all of them are cops, but a lot of them have like, either they were in the military or they're cop coded essentially.
Yeah.
So,
and the thing is, I love this character.
Yeah.
I love her. I will like 10 toes down. I am a Shaw head. Absolutely. Well, so then, like, what do you make of the lesbian relationship here?
I like it a lot. So in If Then Else, we have the moment where the machine has decided the quote unquote best scenario. And it's a scenario where all of our main characters have a 2% chance of living. And then Shaw shows up, and you can see the machine's calculation of the percentage chance that they'll all survive climbing up. Because if Shaw's there, she can save the day. But the thing is, the only way for them to escape is for someone to make a sacrifice. Someone needs to run and hit the override so that they can leave. And Amy Acker, her as Root, she really doesn't want Shaw to do it because she loves her. She can't say it, but she loves her. And then Shaw's like, fuck no. And then she kisses Amy Acker, she kisses Root and pushes Root away, and then runs and hits the red button. And Amy Acker's like, no! And then the elevator's going down, and Samaritan's Samaritan's operatives are shooting at Shaw, and it looks like she's gonna die. She's definitely at least captured, and she sacrificed herself for love, and we finally got the kiss.
And like the kiss is great. Mm-hmm. It's great. I wasn't expecting that. I also wasn't looking at it like the fact that John Reese got shot, the character who would have sacrificed himself, giving Shaw the opportunity as a character to like live up to that like badass bitch role. She does it well, and that kiss, I think, is way better delivered. And the flirting that came before, this is the final scenario, which is the real life. Mm-hmm. The flirting that came before it, the one that they were just talking as they were like shooting people, way better flirting than the first round of flirting. The first round of flirting was so cheesy. But when they were shooting these agents and they were doing their little sachet while shooting across the room, Shah at one point says, look, you're hot, you're good with guns, but this isn't gonna end well. And when I saw that, like, that's when I realized I love Shah. Because Shah and I, we have the same taste in women.
Yeah, I definitely think that like Root and Shaw are not the best flirters. They're not really used to romance. They're used to like shooting people, and it makes sense that they're finally able to like communicate with each other when they're like in the middle of shooting people. It's like they're doing what they love with each other.
And they love it. One of them, sociopath, the other one a psychopath. Yeah, great, love it.
Yeah. This episode, I think some shows, if they did this, it would feel like fan service. It was kind of a double-edged sword though, because like you get the first kiss, but then it's like, is Shaw dead? But I think we all knew Shaw's not dead. Like they're not gonna give us the kiss and immediately pull the future away. And luckily we have seen in the later episodes, so we know Shaw's not dead.
Yeah, and part of my research, I wanted to get like a lesbian perspective on this, or at least a femme perspective on this, a contemporaneous one, outside of our perception. And I found this article at Autostraddle called "More Than Gal Pals: Person of Interest Gives the Gay People What They Want." And in it, as I was watching the episode, I was like, my 2012 Tumblr era theory was jumping, being like, they're fridging her, Sha, no. But no, she didn't die. And in this article, like, it's brought up that she didn't die, and I love that. I also love this line that's like, a queer woman's sixth sense is seeing romantic tension between two women, but I was being a futile exercise. Not in this case.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Autostraddle is you can pretty much guarantee they have at least one article for every single lesbian relationship on TV ever. So yeah, I definitely remember like multiple Autostraddle articles about person of interest.
Okay. Let me ask you this then. Are you does it, outside of the hyperviolence and the techno mambo jumbo, does it feel real to you?
So, of course, this is interesting because the first time I watched Person of Interest, I didn't know I was queer. I didn't know I was trans. I didn't know shit. And so going back to this now, it's interesting because I only rewatched 2 episodes. I don't get the same experience from this as you do watching a movie like Love Lies Bleeding. But I think that even though I didn't get the full experience, I'm just going to say it. Yeah, it felt real. Of course it did. Yeah, you know what? It's like when you see 2 lesbians that are as hot as them and that have good chemistry and they're kissing, you're like, damn, this is it, isn't it?
You're like, she's just like me for real. Okay, I mean, wonderful, beautiful. I'm just I don't wear those pants, right? So like I can't really comment on it. To me, it just felt it felt nice, to see this type of representation, especially in 2015 when this episode was released, which was which was the year where Obergefell was decided in the Supreme Court, codifying gay marriage as a right. So like it is transgressive in its way, even as a someone with a 2024 mind looking at this.
Yeah, and this was like around the era of bury your gays. I think we've mentioned it in a previous episode. Shows like the 100 that they did kill off the lesbian love interests in a very silly way, and there was a huge fan backlash. But yeah, I feel like if we had a Patreon, we could have an episode where we talk about the entire rest of the series and evaluate. But no, I think just based on these 2 episodes, and you know what, I'm gonna break the rules and dip into the next episode a little bit now, because I want to say that if we're talking about the lesbian relationship, we do have to talk about the sex scene.
The fuck scene.
In 6741, which is a season 5 episode written by Denise T. and Lucas O'Connor, and also directed by Chris Fisher. So we get the first Root Shaw sex scene in the series in this episode, and it's very steamy, but it's a simulation.
Isn't it always?
Yeah. Um, that was like another thing where I think at the time it was like, oh, we love this scene, but also it's not real, so we don't know how to feel about it.
And the scene is raunchy.
It is.
Like I like it. It's like I we both seen Love Lies Bleeding,
Yeah.
which is a rated R movie, a different a different pony than this. And, but the in the show Person of Interest, like they not only show kissing but like an active kind of like jousting for like the top position, I guess.
Yeah.
Which I just started laughing at that because I was just like, oh come on, like what is going on?
Yeah, Root and Shaw, they're very aggressive people, so that's definitely gonna come into play during their sex. But yeah, they're like tearing off each other's clothes, and I definitely remember at the time I was like, "Whoa," because I feel like a lot of shows, even when they have gay romances, they kind of end it at like the chaste kiss. You get the chaste kiss, and then now that gay marriage is legalized, you'll get them marrying and maybe like adopting a kid or some shit. But like, no, person of interest, they're like, this is this was like a fan service moment. But like, fan service like gets a bad rap sometimes. A little fan service, especially if you're a lesbian and it's lesbian fan service. I'm not gonna say no to that.
Not in this podcast. If you're a fan service person, you're in the right spot. This is why I call it the fuck scene, because it was wild. And actually I think it was sweet that there was like this like aftercare scene where they were just kind of pillow talking to each other. And I bring in Love Lies Bleeding because there is also like some heavy fucking in that too. But it's also these two like kind of fucked up people. One of them is a literal murderer. One of them is just child to one. And I like seeing. I saw these two like kind of back to back, and I just like seeing the difference here, where about 10 years can provide a lot of runway to show where the timid, of course, broadcast version of a relationship between two like broken people, but ultimately in love people, how far that's gone into something like Love Lies Bleeding.
Yeah, I really liked watching Love Lies Bleeding with my fellow hotties from my queer book club. It was like a really fun theater experience, especially because like, that movie is billed as like the gayest, sexiest movie you've ever seen by Kristen Stewart. But like in reality, it's like an incredibly gross and like kind of scary movie. There's like a lot of like bloody violence in that movie. Which I think some of us weren't expecting. So I think reacting to all of that like together was a lot of fun. And yeah, you can definitely see the parallels between these two couples. And I'm glad that we have Love Lies Bleeding, which, is much more explicit than the love affair on Person of Interest. Yeah, I say the more lesbians, the better. Like we're kind of living in both a renaissance for lesbians on TV and movies, but also most of the lesbian TV shows are getting canceled. We're all hoping that High School, the Amazon freebie show about Tegan and Sarah, we're all hoping that gets a renewal. But honestly, like, it's been so long since that show aired that I don't really have high hopes. And then, of course, you have A League of Their Own and so many other examples where we don't get to see like the rest of the story for lesbians. So yeah, I'm glad that like we get like an entire feature with Love Lies Bleeding.
I mean, yeah, like in the TV realm, yeah, some funding is definitely being cut. In the movie realm, like last year we had bottoms. We had bodies, bodies, bodies. They have, and now through Love Lies Bleeding and a couple of other ones that like really show just a the advancement of like lesbians on screen. So TV, the TV girlies starving. The movie boys, we're eating.
I hope that gets some TV fans really mad, and I want you to be like, "Hey, you forgot about this TV show that is thriving with lesbian romance." Yeah, I mean, do that because I want to watch whatever show you're talking about right now. Like, we only got 2 seasons of Gundam: The Witch from Mercury, so if you got more lesbian TV show recommendations, shoot them at me.
Put them in the comments, DM us.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another lesbian in this show that I want to talk about.
Oh, really?
The Machine.
The Machine.
The Machine? The pronouns used by Root to describe the Machine are she, her. And it looks like Finch kind of treats this machine as its child, as a daughter, let's just say. And this is why the idea of like a cyborg or like the blending of a hyper intelligence like an AI and like a human just brings up the question: who is pursuing Shah?
Yeah, is it Root? Is it the Machine? Is it a blend of both? Good question. And like, what is Shaw really attracted to? Like, would Shaw be attracted to Root if she didn't have the connection with the Machine?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But and it makes it odd, right? Like regularly the concept of the machine, this AI, it's being described in the terms of godhood. Like this is a god, and so for a god to inhabit the mind of some woman, and for the sake of, I'm gonna say, fucking another woman, like this, just it's layers on layers of what the fuck is happening.
Yeah, especially when you have the layer that. So in the first episode, it's the Machine that's doing all the scenarios. In the second episode, it's Samaritan, aka the evil machine. So it's like the evil AI who's drawing up this scenario where Root fucks out Shaw's brains. So, like, is Samaritan getting horny too?
I think by the evidence we have, yeah. Like, maybe in this, I'm happy to believe that the world of Person of Interest, the AI just happens to be like queer and femme. I think that's cool. There's no real like textual evidence that was the reasoning. But it makes this concept of an AI just odder. Yeah. So strange. Like it's treated like Zeus turning into a mortal figure to like, let's just say, seduce a mortal woman. Like
Yeah, and I think this transitions well into our discussion of how do these AIs and Person of Interest compare to the AIs that we're experiencing right now in 2024? Because AI has been in the news a shit ton these last few years, from the strikes where the actors and the writers and the directors are trying to figure out like, hey, how do we make sure that AI doesn't like get rid of all the workers and basically produce like art that like has no heart in it? And then all the way to Palestine, where Israel is using AI to like murder people in Gaza. So there's like a wide range of stuff that we can talk about, but
its AI is so wide range because the applications are so wide range, because The goal of AI is to supplant labor, human labor, for the benefit of the people on top.
Yeah.
And in one way, yeah, what's happening in Palestine, the genocide, Israel's using this AI called Lavender. That collects a whole bunch of information and kind of uses it to decide when someone should be killed. And you see that happening in this show.
Yep.
Like, you can say the machine is deciding who lives and who dies. The characters are seemingly always shooting at people's legs. Jim Caviezel is great at shooting your leg. But it's also choosing when you live and when you die. And so is Samaritan.
Yeah, I think there definitely are some parallels between like how AI is being used in real life and in person of interest. Like, essentially there's definitely like some Minority Report parallels where the machine is kind of trying to predict crime and stop it. But I think that like one of the main differences I see in artificial intelligence between reality and person of interest, AI is so much stupider in real life right now. Like,
Oh, yeah.
like if the AI and person of interest, like, you can, like, it's not too complex, but you can tell that they like put thought into like, okay, if there were these two powerful AIs, like what would they, like, how would they go to war against each other? How would they be used by people? But now it's like AI is just being used by like the dumbest people alive to do the dumbest things possible.
To create the concept of a prompt engineer to make a blog instantly versus before when someone would get paid $20 to write a blog almost as instantly. And it is dumb, but in real world, and I would go ahead and say in the show too, it's also about the application of that, like, short-mindedness. In the real world, we have Lavender Eye deciding when Palestinians live and die. But in the show, in the episode right after If Then Else, in an episode called Control Alt Delete, the character of Control, this like major goon of the American state, like, gets direction that there's terrorists in America that need to be quote unquote neutralized. And these terrorists are in none other than Dearborn, Michigan, the highest population of Muslims in the United States. And so what do? These characters get described as highly educated and therefore highly dangerous because their education is in like science-y STEM fields. And we see just these mercenaries, these other recurring characters, come in and just kill 3 of them instantly, only to later on learn that it was Samaritan that was just using these 4 people as an excuse to get a hold of some resource. In other words, 4 Muslim men, innocent men, died in this show in actual parallel to reality.
Yeah, and you can definitely say that like Samaritan is the quote unquote bad guy on the show, and like this happening just shows like how evil Samaritan is. But it's definitely a case where those characters are just like a plot device to be killed off for the show. And yeah, I think that like I don't think Jonathan Nolan put a lot of thought into like what are the implications for like, imperialism in the US. And I think like that's one of the things I've been thinking about is that artificial intelligence is like being used in a genocide in Palestine when person of interest, like it really kind of focuses on what's happening in the U.S. And it, it feels a little bit narrow in that like it can't really see beyond like the country's borders.
That is the thing, right? Like this is very much all situated in America. To the point that like in the later part of season 4, we learned that the machine doesn't exist in one location, in some server farm somewhere. The machine just kind of exists in this empty space in cables, fiber optic cables, and copper cables. That's just where it exists. So it's all over the United States. Everywhere and anywhere, electricity and the internet exist. Yet that is like there is this kind of mealy mouth negotiation in the show of having this super intelligence everywhere for quote unquote good when the other one is just quote unquote bad. But there's no real difference. There's like the difference is. I don't know what the difference is.
Yeah.
All I know is that materially they're the exact same.
I do think the show plays with this tension where at the end of If Then Else, we have these flashbacks to when Finch first taught the machine how to play chess, and that kind of serves as a way of showing like how the machine learned how to choose between like thousands of scenarios. And essentially the machine, like Finch told the machine, don't treat people as pawns. And to a certain extent, the machine kind of did treat Shaw as a pawn and was willing to sacrifice Shaw in order to save everyone else. So you can definitely ask, like, was that a morally good decision that the machine made? Is the machine really better than Samaritan? I would argue yes, but it's definitely a very flawed artificial intelligence.
In like I think overall those are my feelings. Like it's flawed. Yes, it's flawed, but there's never an outright condemnation or like exaltation of what is being presented. I literally came into this with the presumption that like, okay, so AI exists. Okay, that's a big lift already, but okay, it exists. And then seeing this cat and mouse in between the two of them just kind of like I didn't feel like I needed to root for the machine versus Samaritan because they were both doing the same thing. But generally speaking, yeah, fuck AI. I don't like AI. Like I especially hate it because it is in its current real world formation, just an excuse to offload responsibility, to eliminate work for others, and worst of all, it's just a marketing keyword, buzzword.
Yeah. I remember like when I was in college and I was like learning programming that, AI was like the like it was one of the things where like if you wanted to seem smart, you would be like, yeah, I'm looking into AI right now.
But back then, it would have been machine learning.
Yeah. I mean, AI, we still talked about AI too, but yeah, basically, I learned how to do decision trees. So that was like part of what made If Then Else exciting. I mean, they're literally putting computer language in the name of the episode. Yeah, I think that was before I had kind of. I think the thing is that like all the AI that's come out in the last few years has been so dumb that like I think most people, even people who were excited about AI in the past, like have come to the side of like, okay, this fucking sucks. Obviously there's like the Elon Musk bootlicker type people who are like, I love AI, but yeah, I think most people in the proletariat are like, fuck that shit.
Yeah. I didn't ask you this before, but I'm gonna go ahead and say now. AI, enemy of the pod.
Definitely, definitely. AI, like we had the whole joke at the beginning, but yeah, you're not allowed to guess on this podcast. But yeah, I think let's talk a little bit about surveillance capitalism because this is a TV show where that's definitely at the heart of it, where there's so many images of people being spied on by cameras, and it's essentially what both sides are doing. They have like all of your data, and they're using it to figure out like who's going to commit crimes and when it's going to happen. And they're using that. You could argue the machine's using it for good. Samaritan's definitely using it for evil. But either way, your information, yeah, you don't have any privacy here.
You're a data mine, and you gotta live with that.
Yeah.
In our second episode, 6741, the simulation episode, like part of that, Shaw has this confrontation with Reese and Root at a diner, and she just grabs a phone and she just makes a call and says, "I know you're looking for me," and that is enough for Samaritan to send its goons to get them. And you can, like, that is a fantastical formation of real life surveillance, but it's a clear analog because every part of your phone, the metadata, is being collected at these gigantic server farms. That's what Edward Snowden's leaks were all about, this idea of NSA's Prism collection.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something that, for instance, our generation has kind of just been like, well, I guess this is just how our life is. Like we're literally sitting next to our phones right now, and we're talking about like how much we hate that the government spies on us, and say the government knows that we hate that because we're saying it right now.
And even in a more colloquial sense, very often you hear people say, "My phone is listening to me. I was talking about Jaguar print bed sheets, and then I saw ads for it."
Yeah, that shit happens all the time. It's like how my YouTube was able to figure out that I was a woman, and it started giving me ads, and like that both made me happy and sad at the same time, where I was like getting ads for like tampons and stuff. I was like, oh, YouTube knows that I'm a woman, but also fuck you for spying on me.
Yeah, and there's stories like that in all kinds of different ways. Like algorithms might pick up that you're pregnant before you do, not because of a change in your search or whatever, but just for some esoteric reason that only some algorithm with so many points of data can make that assessment.
Yeah, and I think that at the time it did feel that CBS having a show about how we're being spied on, even if, it's like being billed as science fiction. The thing is, Person of Interest is kind of like set in the near future, which I think that's part of like why it works is that, it's not like this is Star Trek and everything feels so far off. Like everything in Person of Interest like felt like it could happen very soon. And now we're like living in an era where like, a lot of a lot of the technology that's happening in this show is happening to us now. So it's like, damn.
And in like we talked a little bit about lavender, but like in our own backyard here in Chicago, there is this company called ShotSpotter.
Boo, boo.
In ShotSpotter, their whole thing is that you can put up these towers that have microphones and cameras all around. And once there is gun crime, there's gunshots. That information can be sent out directly to to law enforcement so they can come in and stop whatever violence is happening. The thing is that ShotSpotter is sucks. I'm just gonna tell you, like, in my research, like I found this organization, this justice advocacy group called MacArthur Justice Center. And they know that more than 90% of ShotSpotter alerts lead police to find no evidence to collaborate gunfire when police arrive at the location. Collaborative evidence for shootings or shells casings or victims or witnesses or guns recovered. In other words, it's just a waste.
Yeah, this is something that, and I think we have to give a shout out to the comrades in Stop ShotSpotter for putting so much energy into ending the contract. And they were finally able to pressure Brandon Johnson after he basically like left the auto renewal on. That was what he said about the contract.
Hilarious.
They were
Hilarious
finally
in the
able to
negative.
pressure him. And yeah, it's like this is something that doesn't even work, and like also like fuck the cops, and like we don't need something to make it so that it's easier for the cops to like shoot people in Chicago, because that's like what they actually want to use this for.
And that is, yeah, because most of these towers are located at places with black and brown communities. So what happens when you put this, this technology with questionable efficacy in places where you want to police the most? Oh, okay, well, now you just have the excuse to go randomly harass anyone. The thing is that ShotSpotter is only one part of a suite of tech that this company provides. The other solution for this is called Crime Tracer, which is a search engine that you can just like put in a description of a person, like, for example, like man with green hair, white skin, red lips, and laughs a lot. And the search engine just gives in a possible connections to that, and you could click into one of those connections, and this from their promotional material. The connections can be so tenuous that in their promotional material, I saw them say Louis Vuitton wallet as a point of information that could be used to locate someone. And I was just like, what the
Yeah. Basically, like all the technology they use to try to enhance the cops, like, just makes it worse. So, here on Dove Weather, we are all for defunding the police. And for those of you that don't know, ShotSpotter like was involved in the killing of Adam Toledo in 2021. This is a 13-year-old kid who is killed by the cops because of ShotSpotter. And that was definitely an example of why this is technology that is terrible and needs to be needed to be gotten rid of. And it's ridiculous that it took multiple years to do so, even when we had a progressive, quote unquote, mayor in office. But you the listener at home are like, damn, give us, we get it. The world fucking sucks. Give us something to cheer us up. Have you heard of virtual reality? Because Person of Interest definitely has.
Oh yeah. And the whole point of virtual reality is to be like, the world does suck. Why don't you just plug in?
Yeah. So there are plenty of examples of TV and movies that have used virtual reality. And in this case, it's the AIs who are creating all these scenarios for our characters to go through. in the case of our second episode, Shaw is literally going through these virtual scenarios herself. And so she is experiencing, having sex with Root for the first time. But it's all in service of an artificial intelligence trying to extract information from her.
This AI is a freak.
Yeah. So I know you had a few examples of some other virtual realities like that have been in media around that time.
Yeah. Like, I think virtual reality can be like split up into two things: either an escape or like punishment. And for an escape, like this show, like you have to mention Black Mirror with a show like this. And Black Mirror has San Junipero, an episode where two women just get to go into lesbian heaven.
Yeah, definitely another sapphic classic.
There's also Westworld, which virtual reality doesn't just have to mean like some goggles you put on. It could just mean like the approximation of reality for your own enjoyment, and that's what Westworld is. In the beginning, I only saw the first season, but what it is, it's sold as this like pleasure amusement park where you can like fuck and kill whoever you want, and then you can go, log in to be the VP of your regional bank. And then there's also like Upload, another series that was around this time. That was just kind of like, which I only saw one episode of. It was not my thing. It's just all about the idea of gaining immortality by uploading your consciousness, if you could call it that, I guess.
Yeah, there's like so many examples, and for whatever reason, the one that I think of is the Yu-Gi-Oh episodes that aired like after the Pegasus saga, where like a bunch of them like go into this virtual reality like machine for a few episodes. That was like really fun to me. It was like a nice way to like break up the action of like card playing. Like, and now that I think about it, there's also been an episode of X-Men 97 where they're like basically brought into a video game, which I think has some similarities. So yeah, it's something that like we've definitely had for a while that like has persisted.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a couple of community episodes where reality becomes virtual, and like the Imaginatorium or whatever it's called, the room where Abbott and Troy just had their fun.
Yeah, which I've been watching Star Trek Lower Decks, and I'm just gonna say now, this isn't gonna be the last time I mention Star Trek on this podcast. Yeah, Star Trek Lower Decks, which like because I'm kind of coming to Star Trek late, I'm like, oh yeah, that thing that Community did, I took that from Star Trek. So yeah, virtual reality, it's been used in sci-fi, it's been used in TV shows that are mostly not sci-fi. So yeah, everyone's getting into the game.
Would you do it? Like, would you jump into a virtual reality like Pleasure Palace or whatever that might look like, either dueling monsters or shooting a cowboy?
Yeah, I think it would depend on the circumstances. Like I feel like the holodeck in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, like it feels relatively safe. I mean, of course, there are episodes where like they get into a scenario where if they die in there, then they die in real life. But if I'm going to be hanging out with like Bashir and Kira, I think I'll be pretty safe.
Okay. I don't think I'd do it. I just like one of my big things is that I know that I live here in reality, and I know that no matter what happens, at the end of the day, I will have to go back to reality. And I personally think virtual reality, just as a concept, is just not something I would ever vibe with. Even in like the Ready Player One type of VR, where it's like fully immersed, like you could do anything and everything, and in fact the whole world economy is based around what happens in there. Like I would hate living in that. I would hate it.
Yeah, the VR stuff that we have today, it does look really cheesy. Like there are bars you can go to where it's just like all VR. And I've been to one of those to like do my open mics before, and the open mic was good, but I had like no interest in doing the VR, putting on those goggles and stuff. But I'm hoping that like in the future we will have the VR where you don't have to look like a complete idiot when you do it, and it actually feels immersive.
Yeah, and there's like those types of like places at like Second Life or VR chat. Like they're interesting places to go live a certain way. Like I think that there is definitely like literature and in explorations of how virtual space can provide a real sense of identity to someone whose like physical reality doesn't provide that. But I think that's a whole another can of worms. I also just want to mention as punishment. VR as punishment, I think the one that I would go to is just another Black Mirror episode or a special called White Christmas, where it's these characters are trying to figure out who killed someone, a wife of a sort. Clearly, it doesn't matter, right?
A wife of a sorts. Someday I hope to be a wife of a sorts.
Yeah, well, we could be so lucky. Where Matt, John Hamm's character, is blocked from society as punishment for being a sex offender. And in the virtual reality of this show, like everyone just when you get blocked, it literally is just a blob, a gray blob in front of you. So you're alienated from reality and virtual reality.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, yeah, I think virtual reality as punishment. And there are so many Black Mirror episodes where like someone's being punished for something bad, then you have to reckon with like whether you're seeing this horrible thing happen to someone who's like done something completely awful, and you have to think about whether it's okay to punish people even if they do really bad things. And sometimes I can find that really off-putting. Like I remember the White Bear episode. Like that was an episode that some people thought was like one of the best episodes of TV of that year, and I was like, nope, giving it a D plus on AV Club. But
And like, yeah, I mean, Black Mirror plays with that a lot. Like in the special White Christmas, it also the other character Joe, played by Rafe Spall, he has the digital version of him is punished by increasing the dilation of time that he perceives versus what happens in the real world, 1,000 years to 1 minute, and I find it so hilarious. I find it silly because it's almost this desire to like punish someone to the point of absurdity that it's even okay if a digital version, in other words, not the carnal version that committed crimes, gets punished. And I'm just like, what the? No, it's just it's fucked up in a very silly way.
yeah, and to bring it back to person of interest, like Shaw is experiencing essentially having to kill the people she loves, and having to like shoot herself in the face over and over again. Of course, she doesn't retain the memory of doing that because like otherwise when she would start the scenario, she'd be like, okay, I know what's going on here. I'm not gonna fall into your trap. But you gotta think that probably is causing a lot of psychic damage to her, because like when she does wake up, like you're gonna have at least some flashbacks to pointing a gun at your lover again. So yeah, the having being punished by living in virtual reality for a long time, like, you know what, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, seems like a bad idea. Good thing it's so on its face stupid that I don't think we'll have to deal with that. So
Yeah, cut to Dove Weather episode 100, where we're both stuck in virtual reality and trying to get out. And Nomi is the one who's going to be saying everything.
Well, I used to watch Cyber Chase on PBS, so I know how to handle myself when I'm surfing the web.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. You have a lot of experience cybering.
You know it. You know it.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have for like VR stuff.
Yeah.
I just AI stuff, like a lot of tech stuff. Just I would rather it just be magic, because when you base it on reality, it just feels the seams are too visible for me, and I can't really like enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I think that for me, a show like Star Trek does feel more escapist than like Person of Interest. Like Person of Interest feels so much more connected to what's happening right now. You know, of course, you have the Star Trek episodes where they go back in the past. Some of those are really great, but Person of Interest, I think, as it aired, it did feel like it was putting at least a little bit of a magnifying glass about what was happening in America and what was about to happen, which at the time felt like novel on CBS. I mean, you had some other critically acclaimed shows on broadcast TV at the time, like The Good Wife, and CW's The Vampire Diaries, and NBC's Hannibal, but like most of the network dramas were drivel. I'll say that. And now we're in a space where I would say all the network dramas, all the broadcast dramas are drivel. You still have a few good broadcast comedies. You have your Abbott Elementaries, you have your Ghosts, but broadcast TV, like in the last 5 to 10 years, has increasingly become a place where there's like not a ton of creativity. And sorry to anyone who's listening who is a writer for broadcast TV. I don't blame you. I blame, honestly, I blame the shift to streaming, which, as we know, is not actually making them that much money. It's mostly bankrupting all these companies even more.
Yeah, it's always a critique on the economic pressures put on by distribution and the need for profit versus the creative side.
Yeah.
I'm always with the creatives.
Absolutely.
Always.
Yeah, we love the workers.
I mean, thank you for bringing this lesbian representation into my life. I will not be watching the show in its entirety, but I'm rooting for Root.
Yeah, rooting for Root is always a good idea. Yeah, I'm glad we got to talk about this. I know you didn't love every moment of the show, but I'm glad that you gave it a chance and that we got to talk about all the technological politics and also girls kissing each other.
I'll always get behind that.
Yep, all three doves are pro girls kissing. But yeah, I think that about wraps it up for our Person of Interest episode. You can catch us on Instagram at Doveweather, and please give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast platform if you enjoy the show.
The intro music and interstitials are produced by your boy AP.
Yeah, I loved hearing those in the episode last week. And yeah, tell your friends about Doveweather. Fly your doves to your loved ones, and make sure that artificial intelligence doesn't take over your life. We'll be there with you to support you.
And if you're interested in escaping, not into virtual reality, but maybe your imagination, maybe you like what's coming up next.
Ooh,
with that, we'll catch you next time.
Bye.